Does Paul open wide the door for women teachers? The quick answer to the question, does Paul open wide the door for women teachers is, yes, he does. He opens it so wide.
2 Timothy is the last letter that Paul wrote. He wrote the letter to Timothy, the man he was mentoring to spread the gospel in his area. We see in this letter Paul's passion for increasing the spread of the good news. He talks to Timothy in 2 Timothy chapter 1 about the sincere faith that Timothy has. And he says this sincere faith first lived in your grandmother and later in your mother. His grandmother was probably one of the first believers in Jesus. He gives Timothy clear instructions about how the multiplication should take place and who can do the multiplying. Because the advice comes from 2 Timothy 2:2, we call this the 2-2-2 principle. This is what 2 Timothy 2:2 says. And the things you have heard me say in the presence of many witnesses, entrust to reliable people, anthropos, who will also be qualified to teach others.
So who are these faithful people? Many translations of the Bible say, entrust to reliable men. But in reality, Paul uses a specific Greek word that includes not just males, it includes men and women. Paul used the word anthropos, anthropology, humanity. Paul said that Timothy should teach reliable people, anthropos, who are qualified to teach others. If Paul wanted to limit women from teaching, he could have specified males. He could have used the word honor as the only ones who were reliable and qualified as Bible teachers. If he'd used the word honor, it would have clearly made that point. Instead, Paul used the neuter word anthropos, which means humans or people. Now, anthropos can also mean male, but in those cases, in the Greek, it is used in passages connected with a woman, agune. See, for example, Matthew chapter 19, Jesus is talking about marriage. Or look in 1 Corinthians 7, Paul's talking about marriage. Or in Ephesians chapter 5, again, Paul's talking about marriage. So when anthropos as a word stands alone, not in the context of a wife or woman, it carries the standard neuter meaning of human being or person. If Paul wanted to close the door for women, he missed a big opportunity. But by calling out reliable and qualified anthropos, the audience would clearly understand that faithful men and women should pass it on. This verse opens the doors for godly women teachers.
Now, false teachers abounded in Ephesus, both male and female. Paul wanted faithful people to multiply the good news. Who qualifies to teach based on this open door policy? Godly men and women. I want to repeat that. Godly men and women. Character matters. May the 2-2-2 principle inspire you. The Iranian and Chinese churches are huge examples of living out the 2-2-2 principle. Despite persecution for years, they have released and empowered both men and women to teach, to lead, and multiply others. Previously, China was the fastest growing church. Now Iran is the fastest growing church. Iran has no congregational buildings, and the men and women there both use their gifts. Thank you, Iranian Christians and Chinese Christians, for your example of what it looks like and the effects of living out the 2-2-2 principle.
Reliable people. We thank you, the Iranians and Chinese believers, and other nations who are fulfilling your part of the Great Commission. You are multiplying it to different generations. Now, the who is taken care of. Paul also wanted us to understand how the multiplication takes place. How are these anthropos supposed to spread the gospel? Paul lays out in the 2-2-2 principle a multi-generational plan. We see 4 distinct generations. The first generation is Paul himself, who said things to Timothy. Second generation is Timothy received. He heard those things that Paul said. The third generation, Paul tells him to entrust to reliable anthropos who are qualified to teach, so that others are taught by those qualified teachers. In the 2-2-2 principle, we not only get an open door for women and men who are godly, we also get the fourfold multiplication of 4 generations to show how God wanted the church to expand in multiple ways.
The 222 principle displays Paul's heart to multiply the good news. In 2 Timothy 2:2, Paul opened up biblical teaching to all godly teachers, and he laid out a plan for gospel multiplication, the multiplied family. Now, the question I ask myself and I ask you is, are you a leader like Paul who sought to multiply the gospel because you saw the urgency of the good news? Or do you use Paul to limit good news teachers? Let's all be like Paul. If you are like Paul, perhaps too, you will have fruit like the Iranians.
Now, with this good news of the multiplied family, take a few moments and consider these questions. What does this teach you about the character and nature of God? What does it show you about the character and nature of people? What is one thing you can obey? And who can you tell? Until all know, run with it.